It didn't pick it up.
Well, that's all right.
Oh well.
I maxed out the sound quality.
Everyone
Well,
imagined there was a beer can being opened right there. So,
because there was.
yeah, there was.
Anyway,
All right, dude, we're almost in like winter band time now. Winter band is already almost here. I feel like drum corps just ended, and I'm seeing stuff posted online about just auditions coming up for this group and that group, and get your packet here, get it over there. Like it's things move so quickly, and I'm happy about it. I'm excited about it. I can't wait for an indoor season. And that comes from someone that's way less of an indoor fan than an outdoor fan. But I think after the year and a half of all the craziness we just went through, I can't wait. It's going to be great. Everyone's going to be fired up. I don't know.
yeah, for sure. It'll be exciting. The off season between drum corps and indoor feels like it gets shorter and shorter, but I
Yeah.
think after the fans and spectators and just the staff and members getting to have somewhat of a normal summer, getting out there and performing for people, everybody's jonesing for more and more. So,
Yep. I can't
yep.
wait. Evan can't wait. So before we get into today's amazing guest, let me do my little intro spiel. Welcome, everyone, to the Aged Out podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Mike Fantini, and with me, as always, is...
Evan Worrell.
And make sure you hit subscribe on the YouTube channel, drop a comment, let us know what you think about the episode, give us any suggestions or feedback. We always appreciate that stuff, helps the algorithm. Everything's good to go in that regard. If you're watching on Spotify, anyone who's not, check it out. All major podcast services, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, all that good stuff. Hit up LoneStarPercussion.com, use the discount code AgedOut to save yourself $10 on any order of $50 or more. Everybody wins in that situation. Helps them, helps us, helps you. There's a deep breath, and here we go. Social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, all of that. Aged Out Podcast, patreon.com/Aged Out Podcast. And I swear, I feel like I forget something every time I do this, but I'm going to assume I hit it all. And Evan, take it away. I'm super stoked about today's episode.
Yeah, better you than me on the intro. But yeah, today's guest, a legend in the activity. Super humbled to have him on with us. But without further ado, thanks for joining us up from the Northeast, Mr. Colin McNutt. What's up, man?
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, man. Really enjoyed the product that you and the rest of the team put out, that the kids were able to pull out in a short season, which I'm sure we'll get into this summer. I thought it was incredible what you and a lot of the other teams did. And yeah, it was great for the activity, great for the spectators and the fans as us to get to see some new beats and some fresh content and just hear live music again. So yeah, thanks to you and kudos to the staff, man.
It was the single most important season of my drum corps career because, I mean, who would ever thought that we would just be completely tanked, where you can't travel, you can't get together, drum corps is community, marching arts. It's about people together doing something together. And, with COVID, obviously we've been shut out and we all have a story. We all have a story about how that's affected us. Not to get into that in the podcast, but just to validate that, super difficult times. So this was one of my most enjoyable years, but just to see all the corps out there pushing to keep this thing alive and doing a lot more than pushing. I mean, the groups were, regardless of the adjudication, taking that out of the mix, it did not change the passion and the work ethic and really the results of what people were able to do in a short season. And it was fun to be a fan of drum corps, to go out there. There was a camaraderie with the other corps and just really fighting for survival. That's what we really felt like. And I have to say to you both, I'm a little bit of a newcomer to your podcast. My students were forwarding me stuff, said, you got to check these guys out. And I went down the rabbit hole over the last couple of weeks watching a lot of your stuff. And I love that you're opinionated. I like that you have a take on stuff. But overall, you're an ally for anything marching arts, and you're pushing the activity forward with us. And no better year than this to have that type of support. So that's really what kind of engaged me to say, hey, let's talk about drum corps together. I'd love to come on here. And thanks for having me.
Yeah,
No,
absolutely.
We appreciate it.
We appreciate that praise and the kind words. And like you said, I think it was super important just for the kids because there was a lot of well, what's it going to be like with the shows, or what's it going to be like? How are the stadiums going to be? Is it going to be full? Are the kids going to feel that normal adrenaline rush of performing in the lot, in the shows, and having people give it up to it? And I think there were a lot of people at first that were critical of stupid things like, oh, there's not going to be this or there's not going to be that, instead of missing the point. It's like, dude, there's going to be live performances, and there's going to be kids out there just like going after it and getting better and like working their asses off the same way that they normally would. Maybe not for 82 days and it's condensed in this time, but it's the same. It's all the same.
Showed you that the essence of the activity is not about the schedule. It's about the idea that you're doing the most altruistic thing you can do. It's a member-driven activity. In my opinion, I'm giving you my opinion on it, but I think that we work for them. And if you're 20 years old, you age out one time. You have a finite amount of time to do this before you go on and do other things in your life. And it was critical that we were able to safely, get ourselves out there and do something. And I'm speaking from the little bit that I know about all the corps and DCI in general. Like for instance, Boston, we traveled with a doctor. We were testing basically weekly. We were making sure that we were safe and that we were careful. And I think all the corps were doing a version of that. And the idea was that, just sitting back isn't going to help us go forward. And unfortunately, in times of a terrible situation brings the best out of everybody. And the members were just phenomenal. But they were sort of fighting for their last breath in a lot of ways. And I'm not being dramatic. It was, in 2020, we would have had, speaking for Boston, we would have had our January camp. We played 4 or 5 minutes of music outside. We do our camps in Texas and San Antonio area. And we're outside rocking and rolling, and we're just feeling great doing our stuff. And then all of a sudden we're shut down, and we have no idea if it's going to come back.
Gut-wrenching.
Yeah, and WGI, I feel for them because the vaccine wasn't approved at a time when they could have a season. And they were very ingenious and very creative with how they were able to keep content going. And I think that's also a tip of the hat to you all. That's what was impressive, is that you also kept content going, because content kept us connected to what we love about the activity. And, if you flash forward to the DCI season, we were able to do a lot more than people thought we were. And it was extremely engaging. And we were able to, a lot of ways, push things forward in a time when we were hoping to just survive. And I think the members had other thoughts about survival is not what we're about. We're going to push forward and actually get better. And that's what I witnessed being on the tour. And just very grateful that we were able to do it. And it's fun to be able to talk about it.
Yeah, for sure. So you mentioned obviously the 2020 kind of getting the plug pulled in January, February, March there, that first quarter of the year. When did Boston start to pivot towards the 2021 season? And I guess what was that kind of process like for the members? Did you guys stay engaged with them, doing virtual stuff, virtual stuff, and like homework assignments? Did most of the members from 2020 retain to stay with 2021, or kind of how did that happen with the whole crew, the design, admin, and all that?
Yeah, I think I think that's a really good place to start. Let's just kick it off with what just ended, because Evan and I we're completely baffled how you guys did what you all did this season, for lack of a better way to put it. The level of clarity that was achieved, the level of just, it felt like watching a group that had a full tour. There might have been, just across the board with everybody, a few more scratchies, but the level of quality you all achieved from an execution and writing standpoint, how? I just have the question, how?
Back off.
Yeah, a lot of it was that, we really didn't have another in-person meeting. We hung on a little bit virtually in February, and then by March, we sort of had to look at what was happening. You had massive unemployment. You had, major, way bigger stuff going on. And a lot of it too was the idea that we didn't know what the members, were going through. We didn't really know what their story was. A lot of these kids too, they're in school. Now they're not in school, and what about their parents? What about the stuff that's happening? And God forbid, if anybody had an actual connection to something, medical that was happening, there was just a lot of unknowns. So we sort of pumped the brakes a little bit, but I think the idea was that we had a positive direction to the idea that when we can kind of re-engage, we're going to go at it 100%. And I think that was all the drum corps. I think all the drum corps that participated last year, we were just kind of waiting to the point where there was some good news. And of course, we all were watching, the news, and the vaccine was being developed, and we were getting excited about that. So what we chose to do was a lot of coaching. We did a couple of virtual events, a couple of things that we did, like the battery played Spanx. We did a couple of things that we put out there with the kind of Hollywood squares, the pixels, of the different individuals playing, and that did keep the training going, and we did train, but I didn't feel that I wanted to overdo it with the amount of Zooming, because they were doing that with school, they were doing that with other stuff. So a lot of it was just talking about COVID and talking about and validating like kind of what everyone's going through, because I was going through it personally. Half my business was shut down. I make a living traveling and being able to engage in real time with people, and that was shut out. So I think that really helped, that we were able to, as an organization, just talk to the members about, hey, we're there, we understand, but we're going to train. And we did train. We were doing stuff like a lot of the corps were doing, but we weren't doing it at a pace that was crazy. We left a lot of space for them to kind of figure out how they could survive the immediate kind of priorities, it wasn't drum corps at that time, but our board of directors, and I think this is, again, Boston's not unique in this. I think all the corps were doing this. The Boston board, we had a lot of meetings, and we had a lot of talking about how essential it was, whatever a season could be, even if it was just going to finals and performing in a non-adjudicated fashion, that if we could do it safely, we were in. And I think that was a lot for the members to be able to latch onto, like, hey, if we can do something, we're going to do it. And this generation of students, they're amazing. A lot of times, like, I'm old, I'm 50, I just turned 50. So a lot of like people of my generation, they're like, oh, the kids today, they're distracted. They're doing a lot of things. They're spread too thinly. But I would counter that and say that the members that I dealt with, they were just hyper focused on keeping drum corps alive. And I think that was the case for all the drum corps. And as you saw in Indianapolis, it really did come to fruition, which is just, and a lot of that was the timing of the vaccine. So we can't take credit for that. We didn't develop the vaccine. We were lucky that it came at a time where we could do a move-in, and where we do move-in, we are in Vermont, in Castleton, Vermont. It's a very isolated area, very low COVID. The campus that we go to, Castleton University, there's really nobody on campus. We were able to create a bubble very, very safely and crank it up. So we did a month there, and we were able to really program a show. We felt like we could program a show. The visual demands were maybe a little less, but everything else was kind of, we felt like we could pull off what we normally would do in a normal season.
Do you guys think part of that level of achievement came from a sense of urgency that the shortened season put on everybody? Like, you kind of were like, hey, we don't have 2 months to clean this. So it put a little more urgency in the members, and it put a little more urgency in the staff. Like, hey, this part doesn't look like it's going to work. We're not going to wait 3 weeks to water it. Let's just fix it now. Or the members were kind of just like, hey, we don't have time to like not have our heads on straight some mornings when we wake up, that kind of stuff.
I think that it was all that. When you take something away from somebody, unfortunately, as humans, we learn the most when we're in tough times. I hate that that's the case, but I wouldn't wish this on. If we could go back in time and not do it this way, we would continue the way we were doing it. But it really helped us motivationally, because you take it away, and then the members were like super driven in a different way. Not that they weren't driven before, but I think there was more at stake. And I think the kids understood, what was at stake. That you can't assume that DCI is going to even be able to go on. You don't know. There was a point in time where we didn't know, how long this would go on, and if we were able to sustain this, So So it was really cool. Once we were able to get some positive news closer to move in, it was like nuclear energy. Everybody was so excited just to be able to kind of do drum corps again, and it was a great distraction from real life issues that were going on. I don't want to. It's tough to talk about drum corps when it's been such a difficult time. But in difficulties, and you evolve through discomfort. I think drum corps is about discomfort. You eat stuff that you don't want to eat. You rehearse in a way that is completely out of the ordinary. You're not on your cell phone because you're rehearsing 12 hours a day at Move In. So I really believe in those ethics of what drum corps is. It's a great thing. It was great for me as a student, when I was at an age when I marched. So to be able to deliver that experience was great, but the students were the game changer, for sure.
I wanted to double back on that real quick, just and give a shout out to, like you said, to anybody that did this season as a member. I think that generation, this generation, whatever, people like have a stigma of like, oh, Gen Z, selfish this, blah, 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 whatever. But everybody who marched this year did it just for like the love of the game, pretty much. The love of the activity, the love to play, to dance, to spin, to drum, whatever. Because they were able to provide the fans and the spectators really with a normal on-par experience. Like, as a spectator, you don't put numbers on a page. You may look at them at the end of a show, but they don't really mean anything to you. But the kids, like, were just like, numbers, nah, whatever. Staffs, numbers, whatever. We're just going to go out, and we love this activity. We want to see it grow back and thrive. So we're gonna go out here and do it. And really provided us as fans a pretty normal experience, other than maybe a couple things here and there, but whatever. Kudos to those.
How cool is that? I mean, because I think that when you issue challenges to a 20-year-old or an 18-year-old, whatever, when you issue a challenge, think about when we were that age, you're going to step up. And then when you add the pandemic, the sense of urgency was very high. And I agree with you. One thing that was really inspiring to me, just to talk drum corps a little bit, because I'm a drum corps person, a drum corps fan, someone like Crown, Crown, their organization decided not to participate in Indy. So you could look at that as a negative. I saw it as a huge positive. They were like the kickoff to DCI's tour. And they did this live stream thing that was very intricate. And they went out there, they did Move In, because I have a lot of connection there with Tom Hannum's like my dad, basically. So, and Michael Klesch lives down the road from me. We all live in the same town. We're very, very close. And to see what they were doing a month before we came into Move In was really inspiring, because they could have easily just done something really simple, done a little video and call it a day. And they did like this live stream event that really was connected to DCI and really pushed the activity. So my hat's off to all those groups like Crown. They were kind of the first ones. They were kind of like the first ones on the beach, kicking butt and doing their thing. And
for sure.
And it was really great just to see that we're bigger than a recap. The recaps are part of who we are. Competition is life. I think it's okay to practice competition. It's not an unhealthy thing if you can put it in its right place. I mean, any group that goes out, you're trying to bust it as hard as you can and compete. But competition wasn't the reason that these kids are giving up their life to do this. And I think that was proven during the pandemic. And that was the thing that was really inspiring to me, and why I would put this year as one of my most memorable, maybe the most memorable year I've ever done in drum corps, because it was such a, the chips were against you, and it showed you the tenacity of that generation. And, I always say to the members, like, we work for you, what do you want to do? And they wanted pedal to the metal, and it was great. And that was really where this all came from.
I love that. I love this activity. I think it teaches so many, we talked briefly before we started recording, but just so many life lessons and just true like grit to really propel you into your life, I guess. I mean, there's so many things from drum corps that I take in my everyday life. with like just how learning how to manage highs and lows. It's like, oh, this isn't really that bad, or oh, I can push through this and that sort of thing. But
For sure.
I'll pivot a little bit, just slightly. So we're still going to focus on this summer. So you guys had the green light. Obviously, we talked about move-ins. Well, things were kind of rolling in that direction as far as positives to have this summer happen. So you guys go through the design process. Do you feel like, knowing that there wasn't going to be judges and scores and recaps and this thing and critique, it kind of unleashed you a little bit as an arranger and composer to like maybe not put things in the show that would like, for so to speak, check off the box, but just to be like, this is what I feel and this is what I hear. I'm going to put this on the page and see where it takes me.
I think that was more, I'll only speak for my own decision making. That was more how I thought about the warm up stuff, because I felt like we had a chance to do some different things there, because I was concerned that the performance opportunities would be limited. So I kind of delved into my own experience as a player. I said, because if you've ever been to one of my parking lots, it's really about preparing for the show. And I felt like we had, an obligation to make more of a performance out of it. So I learned a lesson about that. Like I said, wow, I should have been doing this really all along. We should be doing more stuff. Any chance we can perform is important. And I put a little bit more into that. But as far as the show design, we were pretty much on par with what we normally would do, with the exception of maybe a few visual things were like a little easier. Maybe we took a little bit of a simplistic approach at a few spots. But as far as the show and the writing, I think we kind of tried to do it based on the kids giving up in summer. They're going to give up a lot of money, a lot of time. So, and I think a lot of drum corps did that. We tried to really push the envelope a little bit and strengthen, kind of where we were as an organization from a performance standpoint, because we had the opportunity to. If you're going to put the drums on for an entire month of move-in, let's get in there. Yeah. So that was kind of what we thought about with that. But I would certainly be transparent about my own transgressions that, especially my cadet days, the shows were so visually demanding at times that we really spent most of our time just preparing how we played in the forums and dealing with the here and now of the show. And remember, it's not WGI. DCI has 80 brass players. I have an obligation to make sure that we're doing our job for what they're doing. And there's a lot more components, I think, in a drum corps season that you have to think about. But I have to admit that I learned that we can also make a little more interesting and a little bit more fun. So that was the fun thing for me to delve back to my days as a player and make it a little bit more fun that way.
Well,
I do love Spanx. That's an awesome exercise.
I loved all the cool warm-ups. I have to ask as an aside, since we're on this subject real quick, and I know Evan mentioned this briefly in a previous video, I think our Boston reaction video, like he threw it out there. Who played Red's Roomba better?
Well, Star of Indiana, unfortunately, by no fault of their own. Star of Indiana was such an important part of my career. I had aged out at Vanguard the year before, and it was my first teaching job. And this group was, used to winning or being at the top of kind of the DCI, pedigree. And Hannum, Tom Hannum is such a great mentor to me, because he's like, yeah, write the exercise, do some stuff. And he was really tuned in to, modernize some things that we're doing. So, and I was 21 years old. In those days, you didn't have the bonus year. If I had a bonus year, I would have marched. So I was teaching, and yeah, we were writing crazy stuff because I marched with Murray, and Red's Rumba had originated. Really, it was just a reaction. It was my own reaction video to March Mambo. It was really, the ditty, to talk like some history. The ditty hadn't been written yet. I mean, this was before that. 93 was a year after I'd aged out. So it was like, oh, well, we should be doing something unique like that. But we gave the Star of Indiana zero minutes to work on it. I mean, maybe there was an assignment like in the winter, and we really never played it. We really never practiced it and played it. So I think it's an unfair kind of a thing because Boston, we had it in the program. I got motivated. I looked at myself. I said, I have to get off my ass here and like write something. And I kind of re-envisioned it, and then they practiced it. And so they were able to play it because we played it all the time. I mean, we never played Red's Rumba at Starve, Indiana, or very little. So they did just fine for the amount of time that we played it, which was never.
There's like one YouTube video of them like working on it, and maybe it's after a show or something, and like one of the comments is like, "Oh, so this group actually was human. That's good to know." Just
yeah. Well, we spent, it's the Starve, Indiana. Not to digress into ancient history, but Starve, Indiana was like, we used to track, so our lot was really boring because you come and check us out. And we were marching around because, the drill demands were difficult, and everything was about making sure the brass and the timing and the ensemble, it was all about that. So we would just spend our warm-up really preparing that stuff. So Red's Rumba, a lot of the stuff, I'd written like a street beat and a difficult, etude like Red's. So we really didn't spend a lot of time on that after we got into Move-In. But I learned my lesson. It's about learning. I'm learning every day, about my mistakes. You learn the most from the mistakes that you make. So for me, it was really about kind of looking at it and saying, you know what, this is a perfect opportunity because the lots might be better videoed. They might be more covered than even the shows. So I really thought about that way before we even got to Move-In. I said to myself, we got to do something more. I need to do something more because I kind of took that away from a lot of my drum lines where we really just focused on the show. So I think that in the future, I'm going to continue that because it was really an important decision that I should have been making for years, honestly.
It was certainly a hype. I feel like
I loved it.
Looking at the members performing that, I felt like it was a hype to them because it sounds and is hard.
Yeah, right.
It's really cool. So it's like you can just tell it's like this is hard, but it's also really good. So that makes it even better.
Yep.
But on a Star 93 note, my percussion instructor in high school turned me on to this. It has one of the tastiest tenor things that I recall. It's like I think it was the beginning of the drum break. It's like and then they just have that roll, and then I think the snares move on to that check it to get that rim stuff or whatever. But anyway. You got to rearrange that piece in 2013. When that came up, were you just like, "All right, let's go"?
Yeah, it was an interesting thing. I wasn't really on board. That was 2013, I think.
Yeah.
George Hopkins, who was really the program coordinator at that time at Cadets, and all the time at Cadets, and Jay Bocook, they had a vision for taking Medea and combining with Adagio for strings, and there was like this kind of duality in that piece. And I remember thinking, I don't really know how we're going to do this better. But then I realized that really no one was playing that style. So I really did try to emulate the style of Star in a lot of ways, this like dramatic, dynamic range and transparency.
Ambers everywhere.
And it wasn't a lot of notes, but the notes count. So a lot of it's interesting. People ask me a lot of times like about style, and to me, it's like being a session drummer. It depends on what the music's doing, right? It depends on what the music requires, and when you're playing Medea, you have an ostinato going, so you have to have that going, and then it's sort of like these riffs or these transparent figures that are happening, and we were running like crazy. It was a typical Jeff Zachtic drill. We were running all over the place, and yeah, it was a really neat to kind of go back in because I really didn't want to do it at first, but it was fun to re-envision it. And there's a lot of what Star did a generation later. That was really how I approached it, because that piece was all about hearing every note. So that was kind of how we wrote it.
I loved it. I loved it. Such a callback, and obviously you being involved in both pretty heavily. I was like, this is going to do it justice. So.
I beefed up the tenor parts a little bit, though.
Yeah.
No, the tenor parts, it was really funny because I was a tenor player myself, and I was teaching primarily the tenors in full battery at Star. And, people weren't really that, to tell you the truth about Star, we used to get booed. I remember being in Bloomington, Indiana. If Jim Ancona listens to this podcast, I'm going to shout out to him, my partner in crime. He was teaching the pit. In those days, he had a very small staff. And we remember coming off the field. In those days, we would kind of go and review. And we came off the field at Bloomington, our home show. We were getting booed because the show was it was very uncomfortable. It was a very different type of programming for what drum corps was doing then. And I don't think that the kids in the drum line knew at that point. If you went mid-season and interviewed the members of the drum line, they would not have been able to tell you, "Oh yeah, we're going to win drums," because you didn't have any understanding that type of drumming would work. And you have to give Tom Hannum total credit, because for him it was about the music, and that was a time in drum corps when the music really could be a priority above all else. And when we went back to answer your question, when we went back in 2013 and did it, it was fun to go back and try to create that low level transparency. And talking to you guys right now, I wish we could have a piece that did that again, because if the music calls for it, it's really a unique way to have a melodic drum line out there on the field, where it's low level stuff, where you're really hearing all these things regardless of where you are on the field. It's why history is important.